What would you do if you ever came face to face with a serial killer that confessed to killing about 30 people? Odds are that you would get scared and probably run for your life because serial killers are known to be quite dangerous. Well, then how would you feel if you were told that he never really killed anyone? Yes, you heard that right. The man we are talking about is Thomas Quick, who is known as the most famous serial killer to ever come out of Sweden. The craziest thing about this story is that he never even killed anyone, not even one person. So how did he come to be known as one of the most prolific serial killers ever? Well, we'll get to that in a bit. But before we get into one of the craziest stories of all time, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you never miss new videos, okay? Now, let's talk about Thomas Quick. First off, he was not born as Thomas Quick, but as Sture Bergwell. He took the name Thomas Quick after confessing to a series of murders that he had absolutely nothing to do with. Thomas had been born to a family of 9 and was raised with his other 6 siblings in a rural Swedish town. His family was a strict Pentecostal one, and when he discovered that he was gay at age 14, he hid it from his religious parents and siblings. But this was not the only thing that he would hide from them, because he soon started getting into trouble. Even though he got into a lot of trouble as a teenager, they were petty issues that were easily brushed aside. But it wasn't until he was 19 and he was accused of violating young boys that his family got to know about his sexuality. But his criminal activity only got worse from there. He was also arrested on different charges that ranged from assault and drug use. But then, in 1990, he was arrested in the process of robbing a local bank while dressed as Santa Claus. Yes, that's just as weird as it sounds. But interestingly, that's not the craziest part of this totally insane story. You see, Thomas went from being a weirdo who robbed a bank as Santa Claus to confessing to several murders that left everyone in Sweden shocked to the core. But how did this happen? Well, we'll get to it right now. After Thomas was arrested while robbing the bank, he was taken in for psychological evaluation and treatment because, well, the nature of the robbery was so weird that the police thought that there was a chance of him being crazy. This isn't surprising because what normal person dresses like Santa while robbing banks? Well, during the psychiatric evaluation, that's when things began to get interesting. Thomas had always felt a deep desire to be taken seriously and to get a lot of attention. This was probably a result of the fact that he was raised with 6 other siblings and also hide the details of his sexuality because of his family's strict beliefs. He wanted nothing more than to be seen and to grab attention. And when he was taken in for evaluation, he asked his therapist, "What would you say if I had done something really bad? Maybe I murdered someone." Naturally, this got the attention of the therapist, and well, everything kind of just took off for Thomas from that moment. He went from being the weirdo who robbed a bank to being a killer and possibly a psychopath. Over the years, Thomas confessed to a lot of murders, but the first murder that he confessed to was that of a 10-year-old boy named Johan Asplund. Johan had gone missing 10 years before Thomas made the confession. He claimed that he had lured the boy after school and had taken him to the woods where he had violated him before dismembering his body and burying the parts in the woods. Now at this time, Johan's parents did not believe Thomas because they believed that they knew who was really responsible for the death of their son. They believed that Johan's mother's ex had taken the little boy and murdered him out of spite. But they didn't have any real evidence to support their belief, so they had to cooperate with the police in the investigation of Thomas Quick. Apart from the fact that Johan's parents didn't believe Thomas, there is also the issue of evidence. You see, there was no evidence that even suggested Thomas had met Johan, not to talk of abducting and murdering him. The only evidence against him was his own confessions, even though the lack of evidence should have been the first red flag to the investigators that Thomas was lying and that he was wasting precious time. After this initial confession, it was like a dam burst inside Thomas because he could just not stop confessing to the murders. And unlike most other serial killers that have been documented in history, he did not have a specific type of victim or method of killing. He claimed to have murdered both men and women of all ages and races. And he claimed to have committed the murders with a lot of different weapons. This should have been another red flag because studies have shown that serial killers usually stick to a method of killing. They operate in a specific area, and they usually have a specific type. Thomas didn't meet any one of the criteria, and coupled with the lack of evidence, it should have been obvious that he was lying. But to be fair to the police, he did have a lot of information about the case that was not made public. He knew specifics about the case that only the killer could have known. This explains why the police believed him despite the lack of evidence. There's also the fact that the police were eager to solve so many murders all at once. It was far easier to pin 30 murders on one man than to investigate 30 murders, you know? But there is a reasonable explanation for how he came to know the secret details of the cases. In fact, the reason is so simple, and it further proves how desperate the investigators were to close the case. You see, in the process of interviewing and evaluating Thomas, they let so many details slip that he was able to put 2 and 2 together to arrive at 4. He was smart, and he used his smarts to outwit the cops and claim responsibility for crimes that he knew nothing about. So why did he do all that? Well, as we said earlier, Thomas was obsessed with being the center of attention, and confessing to being a serial killer was a perfect way to make sure that he had a lot of attention for a long time. There's also the fact that he was drugged out of his mind most of the time. He was confined to a psychiatric hospital where he was given so much benzodiazepine, which means that he was pretty much high when he made the confessions. Benzo is known to reduce inhibitions, and many people believe that his obsession with being the center of attention, in addition to the abnormally large doses of benzo that he got, is the reason he made those shocking confessions. In 2002, the psychiatric hospital got a new director, and quite naturally, he was interested in the case of Sweden's most famous serial killer. However, when he was going through Thomas's files, he noticed that the dosage of benzo he was getting was shocking. He ordered that the dosage be reduced, and this had quite an interesting effect on Thomas. He stopped granting interviews to the press and stopped cooperating with the police. This was a drastic change from his former media-loving personality. This sudden change got the attention of Hans Rostam, who was a journalist. He managed to get an interview with Thomas, where Thomas recanted all his previous confessions. Needless to say, this put Hans against the cops, who insisted that Quick was manipulating Hans. It's not hard to see why the police would not want Thomas to withdraw his confessions. It meant that they would have to admit that they had failed to properly investigate more than 30 murders, and that Thomas had successfully made fools out of them for more than 10 years. Even though Thomas officially withdrew all his confessions in 2008, many people in Sweden still believe that he is guilty. In 2013, he was formally acquitted of all charges, and he has since been released from the psychiatric institution where he was being held. Now, you may be wondering how we know for sure that he really didn't commit the crimes. Well, it will interest you to know that he had airtight alibis for some of the times that the murders were committed. For example, he was spotted at Holy Communion with his sister, at the same time one of his claimed victims was being murdered. Again, this should have set off some red flags, because unless he's a super talented magician, there is no way on earth that he could have been committing murder and be in church at the same time. In another case, evidence that was marked as bone fragments from a supposed victim turned out to be only pieces of hardwood. All this, in addition to the lack of evidence in all the cases, proves that Thomas was just an attention seeker who was as high as a kite while confessing to 30 murders. Now it's time to hear back from you guys. Do you believe that Thomas was really innocent? Or do you think that he successfully managed to trick everyone and get away with murder? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit the like button if you haven't. And don't forget to subscribe and share this video so your friends get to see it too.